Yeah, we're rolling. We rolling. JB cast today is just Tiora and myself. Paul is exiting the building, though he's left his laptop as a sacrificial offering because he's got a family or something like that he has to go and spend time with. T-Bone, welcome. Today's topic, very much,
hello.
I believe, in demand from the people. They want to know about nutrition. So, well, this isn't going to be a long one, but the topic of nutrition is in fact enormous. So I'm going to go right ahead and call this part one of our exploration into the hot topics of different diets out there. So we're talking paleo diet, ketogenic, intermittent fasting, vegan, vegetarianism. A little bit of a brush over all of these in our personal experience. So...
And then the approach that we take when people come to us for advice for food.
Yeah, which that's a big one, isn't it, that comes up from new people coming in. It's like they want to address the training first, and then usually once that's sort of all in a bit of a routine and going well, the next question that comes up is, what should I be doing for my diet, right? So look, officially, this is JB Cast number 11, the food episode, so welcome. All right, so let's start with, a bit of a basic talk on what each of those are, because I'm guessing a lot of people have heard these sort of names and buzz names, but probably don't really know what the fuck many of them are either. T-Bone, what are you most familiar with? Paleo?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I am. I'm familiar with paleo.
Tell me, what is it? Break it down.
Look, I think paleo has... Look, it became a bit of a fad. I think it's starting to die out a little now. The problem with... Well...
Tell me what it is before you break it down.
Well, here's the thing. Like, it's a... There's is it Rob Wolf? That guy?
Yeah.
He kind of made it pretty mainstream. But it was his interpretation of the Paleolithic man's diet, which I think a lot of paleontologists have contested. They didn't agree with it. And my personal opinion with paleo is this: humans can eat fucking anything. We've got a really long digestive system. We can literally eat anything and turn it into fuel, and that's what's made us so. One of the major things that have made us so successful as a mammal on this planet is that we can live on ice and eat a diet of just fats and flesh, and then we can live in a tropical island and live off fruit and ground roots and fish, and then we can live in the middle of the desert and live off the blood of a cow and a little bit of wheat and some milk, and these diets can vary all over the world. So if you look at the Paleolithic diet, it's not necessarily what one specific dietitian says or a practitioner. It is, if the Paleolithic diet was whatever the hell was available at that time, and if you want to really break it down, it's what's seasonal.
Wait, don't go there yet. Tell me what it is.
Well, that's what it is.
Wow, actually, paleo was that? As in the popular paleo diet?
I don't know what the popular paleo diet is, but what the Paleolithic diet is for a caveman. Yeah, right.
Well, I think first, let's say all right, well, let me throw down what I think. Like paleo diet, as in if you read Rob's book, Paleo Solution, and he based that from Loren Cordain's book, which was paleo something else. In any case, it's basically like meat and vegetables and mostly like leafy vegetables, so not so much of the starchy stuff, and then plenty of fat. And I think the things that were mainly excluded were grains and legumes. Yeah, and that was the big...
Grains, legumes.
Yeah, and that was his whole thing, right, was that like they're the devil and that each grain is its own little organism and that it's trying to kill you, and when you eat it, it messes with your gut, and this is why we have all these digestive problems and blah, blah, blah. So essentially, I think in I did the paleo diet for a long time, not super strict, but just followed a rough template of it. And I know a lot of people in the fitness scene were and still do. And I think whether or not Rob Wolf intended for it to go that way, it became a low carbohydrate thing, right? It became high protein, high fat, vegetables, and no carbs. And it was interesting because it was mostly popularized through CrossFit, where people were doing really high intensity training, but then not really consuming any carbohydrates, which we now know is a bit of an issue, right? So I kind of agree with where you're headed, and I'll preempt it by saying that I think it got over-romanticized, the idea of what a caveman would have eaten. Oh yeah, berries and
Flesh
berries
every
and
day.
nuts, and then fucking animals
Just
all
like
the time.
killing animals all day, every day.
Yeah,
When in reality, they're probably more of a scavenger than a hunter,
yeah,
and a forager.
yeah, yeah. I totally agree.
I think the other thing that we tend to overlook with grain is that the human population exploded exponentially when we started to harvest, and it was wheat or forms of wheat or the ancient grains or whatever that allowed us to do that. So if you look at it from like a statistical scale, if something's allowing a population to double and double and double again, then it can't be that bad for you, if you know what I mean.
Yes, I agree, and I think that's an interesting viewpoint. For the species, it allowed success, and I think that what paleo, people who are proponents of that diet would contest is that it was good for the species but bad for the individual, which is an interesting sort of two different perspectives to take on the whole biological front. See a photo, is that, okay, this thing here might not be good for each individual. Let's say like working 20 hours a day and sleeping 4 hours a night, but it's good for the collective. It pushes the species forward at the expense of the individual. So yeah, I feel you. I think that the start of the agricultural revolution, and this is also what is said, and I do agree with this at some point, is that we started to harvest grain, we started to be able to store grain, and that allowed us to eat and move into cities and create a bigger population. But it also was a bit of a decline for our health, right?
Well, yeah. Was it the grain that directly, or is it the fact that with that came a whole bunch of, other changes like the refinement of fuels and stuff like that allowed us to not have to work for the energy as hard. I mean, if you look at Stone Age, harvesting is very, very difficult, very time-consuming, very high energy consumption. You had to work, Nowadays we've got machines that do all of that. So for me, I look at it as if you have energy coming in and you don't burn it, then it's going to sit in there and turn into something that's not so good for the body, If you can burn it, and then you can fucking eat it, As simple as that.
Calorie is a calorie.
Yeah. And to tell you the truth, after all the different things that I've tried, and look, there's shit food and there's good food, but if we're looking at whole foods, you can eat something, and if it feels all right, if it's not making you feel ill, and it feels like a good source of energy, then eat it. I don't think you could sit there and say grains are bad for everyone, because for one person it works really well, and then that same person you give them a potato and it doesn't work so well. Then you swap them around and it's like, okay, this guy works well on this fuel, and hang out there, and maybe 6 months' time that fuel is not working so well anymore. You've got to try something else. And this is where the seasonal thing comes in. The problem with grain and soy and all these other products is that they're in fucking everything. And we're not designed to have exposure to the one food group all year round, every year, year after year. And this is any kind of food group. You didn't have access to a certain animal for that longer duration unless you farmed it. You definitely didn't have access to a fruit or a vegetable or even a grain, even if you did harvest it. And nowadays, you get it in everything. You get it in fucking lip balm. You get it in your canned food, you get it in makeup, you get it in everything. So, and corn as well, the big one in the States. So yeah, I think that constant exposure to the one food group, and if you have a look at paleo diets, like, okay, well, you take the grain out, but then what? You just replace it with another food group that you eat all year round every year.
More steak.
If anything, it's just restricting
More
your
nuts.
ability to have more variety. You know, yeah. Well, that's it. And then the same shit happens. You have a surplus of the one ingredient that in time starts to become toxic. You know.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm not a big advocate on paleo. Are you?
Look, no. In short, I'm not. I think that it's a bit idealistic, and I think in practicality for most people I see in the gym, put it this way: if someone is quite overweight, I think that generally eating meat and vegetables, plenty of, and reducing carbohydrate intake is probably a good decision. And it's case by case, but generally speaking, this is going to help them lose weight. I think for someone who is already at a relatively, at a moderate to low level of body fat, or let's say a healthy level of body fat, if they're training hard, they're going to need carbohydrates because they're not carrying a lot of fuel stores on the body. So, so when you get someone who's like, oh yeah, I want to train 3 times a day, and I also like to go running on weekends and do jiu-jitsu, and I sweat a bunch and all that, but I'm paleo, I don't eat any carbs. That's usually a bit of a warning sign for me, because I'm like, yeah, probably this person is masking their shitty energy with lots of coffee. It's like that's a tough kind of that's a tough balance, I think.
People come on like when you get onto when you come off your average diet and you move into, say, like a paleo diet, you come out of that and you're like 6 weeks in and you're like, fuck, I feel great. This is awesome. Right? It's not. I don't believe that you're feeling great because you're on a paleo diet. You've just made a change.
Yeah.
And that change has allowed you to get rid of something that was in there for too long. And now your body's like, oh, man,
well done.
Finally had a rest from that one ingredient you've been feeding me every day since I was 5 years old,
Yeah. Or you've stopped. I mean, that's right. When most people do that, do they stop eating shit, right?
Yeah. Or
that's that honeymoon period. It's like, okay, no more meat pies, no more sodas on the weekend. Yeah. I'm going to cut the beers out. It's like, well, that's actually why you're feeling good, because you're not having all that junk, right?
Getting to bed at 9 p.m.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm training now also.
Yeah, you're doing all of it. It's true. I mean, I feel the same, and not to be critical for any of the vegans or vegetarians out there, but I know that a lot of people experience that with veganism. I don't believe that it works for everyone, and I see a lot of people that go to it, and they're like, in that first couple of months, like, I can't believe how good I feel. And it's like, yeah, well, fair enough. You're eating like a lot of vegetables. A lot of it's raw. It's all fresh stuff. You've become very mindful of where you're getting your food from. Like, man, you're doing wonders for your digestive system. But down the track, okay, we start to see some deficiencies and whatnot, and that sort of honeymoon period is over, right? Not for all, but for many. I think, yeah, it's that's probably a bit of a phenomenon with starting any new process, like when you start training for the first time, right? Those first couple of weeks you saw and whatnot, but it's a much more profound benefit because of all of the different inputs, not just the fact that you're doing exercise.
Yeah, change.
Yeah, and even the placebo effect and all those things. Okay, so paleo, it's a thing. Look, I think people should fuck with it for sure. I think people should try it out. I think that's one thing to say overall with this topic is that, and we'll come to this later, but no one thing works for everyone. So you have to take charge of it as your own experiment, and you've got to give different things a go. And I we all know people that have had incredible results doing all kinds of different things. So you can't generalize, and that's the hard part about nutrition. But I also think that that's the enjoyable side of it, is that it's an opportunity for you to go and do your own research and play around, and you're the subject of that research, and the experiment goes for as long as you're going to live. But you'll never find the one perfect diet that someone's written a book about, or that we're going to expound on this podcast today. What about keto? You know much about that?
No, I don't.
Okay, let me take you there.
Yeah.
So the ketogenic thing, and this is kind of timely right now because there's a lot of people in the fitness industry talking about it. And my favorite podcaster in the world, Joe Rogan, loves talking about keto. He's got a couple of guys, Don D'Agostino and a couple others. Tim Ferriss likes talking about it. They get on his show and they're all about keto. So ketogenic diet is this idea of eating a diet that is predominantly fat and then, like a substantial amount of protein, maybe 20% of your calories or something like that. And, essentially little to no carbohydrate. The basic premise is that the body has a couple of different fuel sources it can run on. The cells, it can either run on glycogen, which comes from carbohydrate, and that's considered the most efficient fuel source. And the other fuel source is ketones, and that is something that your body produces when there's a lack of glucose to turn into glycogen. So if you're not eating any carbohydrate and you're eating plenty of fat, the body will do what it has to and turn that fat into ketones, and the ketones will become a fuel source for the body. So what it ends up in looking like, and I did this for a little while myself, you have a really high maintenance diet because all you can fucking eat is butter and avocados and like pork belly and coconut cream. Like you're constantly chasing fat and olive oil and nuts, and you're eating some salad and things like that, but you're trying to stay away from anything that's going to raise your insulin levels, right? I found it ridiculously high maintenance. I don't like eating that much fat. Doesn't seem to digest that well with me. At the same time I was training, I was doing, the strength training that we do, 5, 6, 7 hours a week, plus a couple of pretty hard jiu-jitsu classes. And again, in that honeymoon period, it kind of worked all right. I remember I'd drink a lot of coffee before training, so that would perhaps cover up any lack of energy. But it wasn't sustainable at all. I struggled on the mats at the end of it, and I think that my recovery suffered as a result. So for me personally, it was a hard one. I didn't mind it as an experiment, but it didn't feel like a long-term solution for me. However, I know a lot of people that would fucking bet their life on it, that it's the future of diets. Have you come across anyone that's messing with that?
Yeah, I mean, I get that's been around for a while. It just didn't have the catchphrase. I've tried it, something similar, and it didn't. It felt great when I was doing it. I got really, really lean really quick, which was a warning sign for me because that's not something that I.
You'd be pretty close to death if you got any leaner.
No, I didn't want it. And fat just started falling off me, and I was like, I'm feeling good, but the numbers didn't reflect that in my training, and I couldn't hold any body fat on my body, and I just thought, that it wasn't for me.
Yep.
I know Betsy has kind of, it's pretty similar to that. He has a little bit of carb in his diet, but not a lot. Yeah,
I think Betsy was mostly on that. Yeah. Probably with a slightly higher protein ratio than standard keto.
Yeah. So, and I think he sways it. I mean, he's a fit, healthy, strong guy. But other than that, no, I don't know anyone that's... Look, you hear about people all the time hitting this kind of diet, and 3-6 months down the track, if they last that long, they're back to eating the way they were. And this is where I think the problem lies with any kind of diet, because you have a way of eating. It's not the right way, and your body's reflecting that, whether it's your energy levels or your body fat percentage or you can't hold muscle, whatever it is. And then you go on this fancy diet that puts all these different restrictions on the way you can eat. You see drastic change quickly, but it's unsustainable. And then you go back to what you know, and you haven't learned anything. You haven't learned what you needed to change in the way you were eating before you went on the diet. So you were back to where you started, and usually in a worse place because your body's just gone through this fucking roller coaster. And now you're carrying more body fat than before, and energy levels are even lower, and you're reaching out for shittier, faster sources of energy.
Your metabolism's all fucked up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. I was thinking we should probably break down what protein, fat, carbohydrates and whatnot are, because I'm sure there's some people listening that are like that maybe we've scooted a bit far ahead of. But in essence, if we break down foods into very broad categories, they can go into three different areas. They can be a protein, a fat, or a carbohydrate. They're considered the three macronutrients. Alcohol is also considered a macronutrient, kind of sits outside of these. But essentially, any food that you eat will have a higher percentage of one of those macros. Let's take an egg. So an egg has fat, it has protein, it probably has some carbohydrate in there somewhere, but it has more protein than anything else, so it's considered a protein source. Likewise, pasta, it has a bit of everything, but it's considered a carbohydrate source. So really, when we're looking at these different diets, there's much more that goes into it from a micronutrient perspective, but talking about these macronutrients, we're discussing the ratios and where each of those three macros sits. So that, the keto and the paleo thing is largely at the expense of carbohydrate, right? Look, I further to that. No, wait, I'll come back to that point. All right, take us to intermittent fasting. Tell me about
that. Okay, so intermittent fasting, the process is to drop your calories to a very low quantity for, I think it's like a day, 12 hours or 24 hours or something like that. I think it's 400 to 800 cal one day, and then 2 days of eating pretty much what you want.
What's a calorie?
Per day, and then dip back to 400, I think, every second day.
Yeah, that's one way. There's
something like that.
Yeah, there's a few different protocols that were popularized by Michael Mosley in that SBS series he did, which was really good. He's an interesting cat. But one of them was, of the 7 days in the week, 2 of them are calorie restricted, right?
2, yeah, that's one.
So they were like 400 calorie days. So what is that? It's like a couple of eggs, maybe a small piece of toast, and a couple of strawberries. That's it for the day, right? But then there's other formats, right, that people are following. I used for a while, and to quite good effect, the what is it? It's the 16 and 8, which was every day you have 16 hours of fasting where you don't eat a thing, and then 8 hours of feeding where you can eat as much as you want in those 8 hours. I know a lot of people that use that quite effectively. And then I guess even like, there's people out there who, let's take Muslims. They have Ramadan every year, so they have a period of 4 to 6 weeks, whatever it is, where they don't eat while the sun's up, right? Christians have the same thing.
Yeah, I think Greek Orthodox.
Yeah.
Well, I think they just cut certain food out of their diet.
Yeah, okay.
They can't have cakes and stuff like that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's definitely going back to the paleo years.
Yeah.
But like fasting as a thing has always been a part of
it's been around
human
forever.
diet, right? Like, and I like to look to the old cultures, to the religions, because they were fucking doing it. They're like, yeah, well, like whatever. I know a lot of Muslim guys who have found a way to hack it now. They just stay up all night and eat whatever they want when they should be asleep. So they don't have to eat during the day, but they can eat all night. But, in reality, if you're looking back a few hundred years, or let's go back a couple of thousand years, it kind of seems intelligent to have a period where everybody is fasting to give their digestive system a rest, and to make you appreciate the abundance of food that we now have, and all of those things. What are what's the key ideas? Are you familiar with the key ideas behind fasting?
No, not really.
Do you do it?
I don't. I've tried it, and I only tried it because there was a bunch of people that I was training that were talking about it.
Yeah.
So I thought, I'll just give it a go. I know it's got to do with cleaning out the digestive, like giving it a break from food traveling through it all the time. I think it does something to your metabolism. It cleans your blood system out of insulin, I think. I'm just guessing at the moment. I'm watching that fucking doco.
Trying to recall.
I don't know a lot about it. It sounds like, again, like something that would work, that took place naturally anyway in our environment, like the whole feast and famine, because breakfast, lunch, and dinner didn't really exist for the caveman, I'm guessing. And
Yep.
you'd eat on the run, and
Or
if
the
you grab a
peasant.
few fucking berries, you'd eat them, and then days would go past before you found something that you could hunt, and then you'd hunt it and you'd kill it and you'd gorge on it, and then so I understand that, like, from that point of view, it makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
But that's all I know. I don't know what the actual effects of the diet are supposed to be.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, I mean, look, I think in simplistic terms, it's like, that's really all you need. I think that's all we need to acknowledge is that, like, it occurs naturally. You know, if you skip breakfast one day, then you're automatically doing some fasting intermittently, so you're already doing it. But the necessity for it, or I guess the reason why it's such a thing now is because we live in an environment where we can eat, 3 square meals a day. We can snack whenever the fuck we want, and we tend to eat too much and not do enough exercise or movement. So we're eating in a surplus constantly. We're constantly consuming. So the idea of putting your body into a state where it's like getting a little bit hungry for a while is alien to most people. And so it's probably a good idea to explore it, right? I know that some of the interesting stuff from the SBS doco was talking about like obviously resting the digestive system, which then allows the body to allocate energy to repair other things. So I think they were saying like cellular repair, and specifically if you've got, cancerous cells, which everyone's constantly fighting off. But if you've got things like that, things that are attacking the body's in a much stronger position to defeat those things. But also, which I found really interesting, and it kind of makes sense to me, was the improvement in cognitive ability.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, right. So he was saying when from an evolutionary perspective, when you are hungry, it means that food is scarce. So it means that it's more critical that you find food at that time. So there's this little mechanism that somehow unlocks more cognitive ability, makes you a little bit more on edge, a little bit sharper, a little bit more focused, so that if
More
you're
driven.
you can fucking get that animal, do what's needed, and then you get the food. And I think that
You get all docile.
yeah, then you turn to a fucking slob, right? Yeah. Like when you go to one of Paul's family things and you sit down and have the big Fijian feast, and then afterwards everyone just lies there.
Yeah.
And you usually like nap or, have a really slow conversation for a couple of hours and then you go back for more. But there's definitely that sort of thing. When you feast, you get tired and a bit lazy, and then when you're hungry, you're more energetic in a way, to a point.
I've found that when I did it for about 6 weeks. I did the Michael Mosley one, and I found you feel like you got more energy, but I just felt more alert when I didn't have food in my tummy. I felt like I was more productive. I think because you don't have that break to eat anyway, so you got extra time on your hands to.
Yeah, you gain like an hour.
I did find that it re-collaborated my what I felt was my interpretation of being hungry, because the first couple of days I hit some pretty serious like walls, and I was like, man, I got to eat, and then I was like, shit, I've only been without food for like 4 hours. I shouldn't feel this hungry, but after the 4th or 5th day, I was like, okay, I'm empty, my tummy's empty. I know I haven't eaten for a while, but I've got heaps of energy in my tank. Like, you could feel it coming from other places. So the body's ability to to transfer fat into energy and that kind of stuff just probably becomes a little more efficient, and other systems start kicking over. And the other thing that happens is that mentally you start to recollaborate and go, okay, well, this is how it is. I've adapted, and now you can start recognizing the difference between what you feel is hunger and what true hunger is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
rather than just that habitual hunger.
Yeah, it's like an emotional hunger where you're like, oh gosh, I just need to kind of fill
like a
the
crave
gap.
your love kind of hunger.
Yeah, like a chocolate hunger or a coffee hunger or whatever it is.
Yeah,
and a fuel hunger where you're like, okay, this is I need fuel now to function.
Yeah.
I feel like that's where I am at with my food now. I'm pretty intuitive with the way I eat. So if I'm eating and I think this is one thing that Adrian actually taught me was just to be eating, like have an awareness when you're eating and before you eat, rather than just randomly picking something up and chucking it in your mouth and chewing on it and swallowing it, and before you know it, it's gone. To be able to ask yourself, okay, why am I reaching for this particular food? Is it because I want to reward myself after a hard day's work? Or is it because I want to replenish my energy stores to hit that run? Or is it because my body's fatigued and the muscle and tendon and ligament is damaged and it needs repair? Like, why am I reaching for this food, and how is it going to benefit me? And I find that the more intuitive or more in tune you are with what your body actually needs, the more chances you have of picking the right fuel at the right time. I actually experimented with this on my children. I've done it since they were born, and that was just to give them the opportunity to choose the food that they want at that particular time. And it would all be good quality food, but there would be an element of fats, some carbohydrates, some protein, some fruits, some vegetables, and just let them go through, especially when they were babies, and just taste things and get an idea of what these different food groups were, without knowing the names of them, without even knowing what they look like. They're just using their body's intuition, and and it might sound strange, but they always picked what they felt their body needed at the time. Always,
Makes sense.
They'd go, there's this big carbohydrate, and then they'd go to the fats, and then they'd go, to the fruit. But every day it was slightly different. It was really strange. It wasn't the same. You'd think it would be the same thing every time, and they just have a habit for like fucking sugar,
Yeah.
But it's definitely not like that. And then they would sometimes gorge on protein, and then other times they wouldn't even look at that, and they'd just be after, something with the high sugar content in it.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot to say about just letting, being able to tap into allowing your body to choose what it needs at a particular time, and not to. Sometimes when you have so much information, you start to lose track of the fact that you have senses, and you have taste buds, and you have smell, and you have reactions to these smells and tastes that tell you what your body needs, because that's what it is at the end of the day, isn't it?
You have all the equipment you need to
fucking use by date on food. Like, you see people read a use by date and they just chuck it out because the use by date says, some company that sold me a fucking product is telling me to throw that product out early, or maybe not.
Yeah.
But why not open it, use your taste buds, and just trust them, You don't have to be told what's good for you and what's bad. And if something doesn't taste right for you, if it's too bitter, well, maybe that's not good for you. But if you feel like you can tolerate it, then you should eat it.
Again, we're talking whole foods, not Pop-Tarts.
Yeah.
It's true. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Like, going back to those instincts that you have of, systems that have evolved over hundreds of thousands of years. They're fucking great systems, but we're often clouding ourselves from being able to use them to judge now, and we just outsource it to the use by date, or whatever that restaurant's serving, or what someone else thinks.
Whatever someone's telling us is good for us.
Yeah.
Which all went to shit when you look at all these products that the Heart Foundation puts a tick on, and now you look back at some of this stuff and shit like Nutri-Grain and things like that, and you're like, what the hell? This is what the big companies are telling us are good for us. But really, at the end of the day, a lot of it's just fucking junk.
Well, there's an interesting question then. So, talking about going back to more intuitive awareness of these things, you could make the case that people should be able to do the same thing with exercise in a way, right? It's like you should be able to kind of sense what the body's in need of in a way, and today I feel energetic and I want to train heavy and hard and intense and whatever, and then today I'm feeling nervous system's a little bit run down, I'm going to train a bit lighter, maybe stretch, whatever, something a bit more skill based. But we know that in reality most people aren't in a position to do that, right? So we try to cultivate that here in the gym with our people, and people get better at it, and some can do it, but really for most people, they're working too much, they're not sleeping enough, they've got too much shit going on in their life there's too much of a cloud around them when it comes to sensing those more finer tuned details. Do you think that somebody in that same position can cultivate a similar awareness around food, or do we now need to rely on structures and parameters, i.e. diets or, macronutrient targets or whatever, in order for that person to get to where they want to be?
I think that's where it has to start. There has to be an education at the beginning, but I think that education needs to work its way to a point where somebody can start calling the shots on their own. Just like what we do in the gym for our training, we teach them the foundation and we make it strong, but then that's with the intention of them being able to go out and do the things, or do it all on their own, to one day be able to build their own program, or if they hurt their shoulder, what they need to do to manage the injury, bring it back to strength. If they want to climb a mountain, how their approach to their goal is, what that's going to be. And I think food is the same. The more knowledge you have about what your food groups do, what quantities you need, and you only need to know for yourself. You don't need to know for everybody. And the more in tune you're in with that, then the more likely you're going to get the changes out of your body that you want. And speaking of, look, if you're thinking about what most people come to us for when they talk about nutrition, there's always a goal behind it. It's not, and it's not usually like just a common interest. If it's not because, I've got an interest in food, could you tell me more about it? It's like, I want to put on muscle and I want to lose fat. They're the two major reasons why people have an interest or come to me for any kind of information on food.
Yeah.
And I feel, would you say the same?
Totally, yeah, 100%.
So I think from what we've seen, the big roadblocks there are people that can't put on muscle and are carrying body fat. And a lot of people that are carrying like excess body fat, and they're trying to shift that. I think over the last year we've found that a lot of these people just aren't fucking eating enough.
Yep.
The quantity,
which is a crazy
really
paradigm,
low.
right?
Yeah, it's strange.
Starving themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a big learning on I guess in our own development. Fair to say, like, we're not nutritionists. It's not. We're not biologists. Like, there's places that you can go to for the science behind these things. But yeah, totally right for the people, that we've been working with lately. It's like, fuck, people are not eating enough. And so then they don't have enough building blocks to build new tissue and recover and, put on muscle, for those that want it, but even just to recover from the hard training they're doing. So then what's the flip side of that is that they're under recovering, which means they are stressing the body out, which means that stress hormones like cortisol are quite high, which means they're not resting well enough. They don't have a proper appetite. That leads to metabolic issues. Like, then the body, because it's stressed, it wants to store fat because it thinks that, the situation's pretty bad. So it's like, okay, I'm going to start to store energy here. So it's this whole shitstorm that occurs purely because you're not eating enough. And I think that for a lot of individuals, I know particularly for females, who, we could probably blame, whatever, fashion magazines and fucking, modern female fitness industry marketing. But it's like they're trying to stay slim and lean, and it's all about like eating little bits. And it's like, man, it's fucking you up. Like it's ruining you, right? So yeah, I know like a couple of people I'm working with, giving them a bit of advice on where they're at with their nutrition. I'm getting them to eat way more. And the first thing that they tell me in that initial week or two is like, I don't feel comfortable eating this much food. And then usually after a couple of weeks, they're like, I'm feeling great.
Or they're like, I'm actually hungry.
Yeah. And I'm losing body fat and I'm training harder and all those things. Again, it's interesting, right? It's that case of like, you are not just a machine that responds to one input at a time, but it's like you are constantly responding to multiple inputs. So the stress from the mortgage you have, your children, the fact that you fucking get stuck in traffic on the way to work, you have an argument with a friend or a partner, you don't sleep enough, you enjoy too much alcohol on certain evenings. It's like all of those things combine to put you in a position where the body's just not going to let you lose the fat, right? I heard someone say the other day, which I quite liked, the number one trick for weight loss is sleeping more. And I thought that's a fucking really good point. I think sleep is, maybe not something we're going to go into on this because that's a whole nother episode, but that's another huge part that people are undervaluing in their health. Would you agree?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, rest. It's a tough one.
Fuck yeah.
It's a tough one it's actually a discipline,
Yeah. It's true. You have to cultivate it, don't you?
Yeah.
And practice it.
It's not easy.
I'll admit, I'm not that great with it. But man, look, we've covered, it's the tip of the iceberg really, right? We spoke a bit about paleo, a bit about keto, a little bit about intermittent fasting. There's more to go into. We're going to wrap it up there for today.
I think next time we talk about food, we can talk about the approach that we've settled on. So we've come in a, like one full circle really.
Yeah.
And now we have a system that we run through the gym with our members, and we have almost levels where obviously the information is available for everyone, and then we have an accountability system that we use also that we charge individuals for, but this is a little more in depth. But we can go through the approach that we use with that next time we talk about nutrition. Maybe we could make that our next one.
Yeah, totally. Let's
Part
do
two.
that. Part 2. And I think I'll throw some show notes in on some other podcasts that if people want to go deeper down the rabbit hole, they can listen. I know I've, over the years, I've listened to a lot of really good podcasts from some interesting individuals, even ones that I disagree with, take like the keto ones and stuff. But I think it's really cool to expose yourself to all that so that you can start to make your own rounded opinion. So I'll toss some of them into the show notes. But
before we finish,
yes.
What is a calorie?
Yes. Good question. Okay. Someone's going to fucking tear me to shreds if I get this wrong, but I believe calorie is strictly a form of energy, or a measurement of energy rather. And so it's defined as the amount of energy that it takes to increase the temperature of 1 cubic centimeter of water by 1 degree.
So 1 calorie equals unit?
Well, 1 calorie equals the heat of the flame that it takes to heat that small piece of water, centimeter by centimeter by centimeter, up by 1 degree, right? So imagine you got a lighter and then you got like a little clear glass cube with the water in it, so you're measuring how much heat is being output to raise by 1 degree. So it's a very crude form of food measurement, but basically I think the guy that, I think it was a French guy many, many years ago.
Le calorie.
Yeah, that's right. Jacques Le Calorie. Dickhead. I believe that he just set foods on fire and basically measured the temperature that came off them and how long they burned for, and from that was able to deduce how calorie dense those foods were. So it kind of makes sense in a way if you think of a burning piece of animal fat will burn for a long time and it will burn hot. So fat is very calorie dense. If you burn a lettuce leaf, it won't burn for very long. It's not calorie dense. If you burn a bundle of grain, it'll probably burn for a long time too. Like dry wheat or something like that. Or it might produce a lot of heat, might not burn as long. So that was kind of, that's why the calorie thing is perhaps a contrasting topic, because it's like so oversimplified, but then it also kind of really works as a very simple black and white metric. So let's go into that next time. Talk about the calorie in, calorie out deal. But yeah, look, thanks for listening today, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're going to chuck some notes up in the show notes. We'd like you guys to investigate the other stuff, the other podcasts and whatnot. That was JB Cast number 11. We will catch you guys in a couple of weeks. We're out.
Peace.